Welcome back to the Jaco Report. Missouri could soon end up with a controversial anti-illegal immigration law, much like the ones in effect in Arizona and Alabama. Both of those states have fashioned anti-immigration laws that supporters say are needed and opponents say are at the best racist. Those laws, like the proposed law in Missouri, require police to check the immigration papers of every person they question for just about anything. The version introduced in the Missouri legislature, Senate Bill 590, also requires all students to produce a birth certificate before enrolling at school. It also tracks how many children are enrolled in English as a second language programs. Now, is this something we need? Is it racist nonsense? None of the above. Well, none of the state lawmakers from Jefferson City who support Senate Bill 590 were able to join us today. But we're pleased to be joined, first of all, by Joe Brazel. He is a member of the St. Charles County Council, where 2 years ago he sponsored a bill that passed in the council in support of Arizona's anti-immigration law. Also joining us, Ken Schmidt. He's an attorney from South St. Louis County and is chairman of the Missouri-Kansas chapter of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Now, Joe, first to you. You've supported, a resolution supporting the Arizona bill 2 years ago. Having looked at this one in Missouri, why do you think something like this is needed? What's the necessity for this?
Well, regarding the St. Charles County ordinance, it was an ordinance, not a resolution. We did pass a resolution. We also did an ordinance. A lot of the building trades came to us in '08 we were doing community development money, which is paid for by the taxpayers for community development, and we were building government subsidized housing projects, some large apartments and so forth. And what happened was there were a lot of out-of-state contractors, Texas, Arizona contractors, hiring illegal immigrants building these projects. So the carpenters union, the plumbers, pipe fitters, they all came with us with major complaints, and so we addressed it that way. Now, on a county level, we do have issues with illegal immigrants. When we pull over an illegal immigrant, there's several instances that even if a county deputy will bring them down for detention in the corrections department, even if there may be 5 to 10 of them where we bring down, there's also issues with ICE not being responsive, not coming down. ICE doesn't do anything with them.
ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Right. And so there's quite a few issues with the system's broken. It's just completely broken, and the people want something done with it.
And so because the system's broken, I guess you would believe it's up to counties or states, local governments, to take charge of the situation.
We have to. The federal government's not doing their job, and it's becoming an economic burden on taxpayers on a local level, on a state level, so something has to be done because the federal government is not doing their job.
Okay, Ken, taking a look at what's in 590, I mean, obviously you don't think it's necessary, but of all the things in this, what do you think is the worst thing from your point of view?
Let me just take 1 second. I'll agree with Joe Brazel that the immigration system in this country is absolutely broken, and the problem is trying to enforce a broken system that's not going to work. Thus, more attempts at the federal level, more attempts at the state level to enforce a broken system is always going to result in failure, and thus we're opposed to state attempts to try to take a state initiative to do what some people feel the federal government's not doing. Now, in terms of what's the problem with 590, 590 has basically 3 components, and one is to, as you said, to require the public school registration of all students and determine their status. But it's not just to determine the status of the child. Even in cases of U.S. citizen children, it's if it appears that their parents may be foreign-born, it also requires the determination of the parent's status and requires reporting of this information to a state database. And while ostensibly that information is supposed to be confidential, it does allow the communication of that information to the federal government for immigration purposes.
Joe, I wanted to ask you, if the situation is broken, I mean, we all, I think, would agree on that, but is it, despite what happened in St. Charles with these out-of-state contractors, is it a problem? Because there are many people who say, why is Missouri passing a law like this? This is a problem for states like Texas, Arizona, Florida, California. But in Missouri, a rampant illegal immigration is not much of a problem at all, so why bother with something like this?
I wouldn't say that it's not much of a problem. I would say that it is a problem. And I would also say that if the federal government's not doing their job, I feel that the local government, like county council members and state legislators, feel that they have to do something. the best case scenario would be if the federal government was doing what they're supposed to do, but they're not. Now, when people enter the country illegally, that's what it is. It's illegal. It's unlawful. If people don't like the way that is, then change the law. But we're a land of laws, and we need to follow the law, and that's all there is to it. And there's no other argument here. I mean, if you're breaking the law, then you've got the consequences. So that's what I feel it's about, and I think that the states feel like they want to take more charge. They need to be in charge because the federal government is not doing their job.
Ken, what's wrong with that argument?
Well, speaking of the laws of law and enforcing the laws, 2 federal courts of appeals have looked at very similar provisions. The registration of public school students has been ruled upon by the 11th Circuit Federal Court of Appeals, and they've said, and this is in response to the federal government coming in and suing the state of Alabama to halt and it's not very similar, it's identical language, and they've said that no, this is federal purview, this is this area of immigration regulation, this is an attempt by the states to do exactly what Joe said, to try and take over what the federal government is supposed to do, and the states are preempted from this. So the law is the states are not allowed to do this in the area of the public school registration. With respect to determining the immigration status of people who were stopped on a traffic stop, the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals have also said this is an area of enforcement that's been preempted by federal law. This is Congress's purview, and it's the federal government's decision to decide how to enforce immigration. And with respect to requiring additional state criminal sanctions for not carrying a green card, first of all, most undocumented people, and we say undocumented, not illegal individuals, but most undocumented individuals aren't entitled to a green card anyway. But to the extent that the statute attempts to impose more state sanctions for this, both the 9th and the 11th Circuit have said no, you cannot. The states cannot add additional penalties.
What about, and I want to get the feedback from either one of you. What about the feeling among some people that whether or not this is a giant problem or just a small problem that needs to be taken care of, that there's more of a political dimension to this than a law enforcement dimension? In other words, you've got a lot of people, especially with the economy crashing, looking around thinking, oh, that guy who speaks Spanish down the street, maybe he's the reason I lost my job. In other words, that there's a certain amount of political pandering in passing these laws rather than responding to an immediate legislative need. I mean, is there, Joe, you're actually in the political arena. Is there a certain amount of that where your constituents are yelling for it, that this has to be done?
That could be true. Yeah, there could be some political pandering going on. I don't deny that. But I still think that it's in politics. It's always going to be a little bit of both. It's people wanting something, it's political pandering, and it's necessity and need. So I think that I think we do need to do something. I think that this is a law that's just trying to. Is it a feel-good law? No, I think it'll help. I think it'll help.
You actually do think it will?
Yeah, well, yeah, we were talking about it earlier. I mean, in Alabama, a lot of the undocumented immigrants, they've left the school system. Now, so in my view, it worked. It did what it was supposed to do. In the United States, we spend over $12 billion a year on illegal immigrants in the school system that aren't paying taxes, and that's the problem. That's a huge problem. I mean, it's a huge financial burden. It's no different than you or I. If we don't pay taxes, we're going to face the consequences. People need to follow the law, go through the immigration process lawfully, and pay taxes. And those are things that we're required to do.
But if these people are employed, they are paying taxes through withholding. They're just not paying, income taxes, maybe. But
and they're not getting the returns.
Well, here's my question, and the same question for you. How much of this, and you guys in immigration law see this all the time, how much of this is a response to a real need to control a system that's broken? And how much of it do you think it's political pandering to people who are worried about their own future and they've got to blame it on something?
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's pure political pandering. There is all kinds of research now that's solid research that's out by people like the Pew Hispanic Center, the Global Initiative out of Chicago, the Immigration Policy Center, that shows undocumented individuals and immigrants in general are not taking jobs away from American workers. They fill a void at the very, very, very high skill level and at the very, very low skill level, whereas most of American workers are in that middle.
But you still have the basic idea that Joe said that, look, the law is the law. These people broke the law getting in. Something has to be done. Is there anything to that argument?
The problem is that there would be something to that argument if the law were just and if the law worked. But the law as it is a broken law, and what it results in is broken families. It tears apart our communities. It takes people who are actually very positive and good members of our community. And I know there's an attempt to paint all undocumented individuals as criminals and bad people, and every community has that element. But the vast majority of the people who are here undocumented are people who came, if they entered without inspection, they came here because they're trying to make a better life for their families. They're doing what you and I would do. And to enforce the law as it is in that circumstance results in just a very broken system that doesn't work.
Guys, we are flat out of time. Joe Brazel. Joe, thank you very much for coming in. My friend Ken Schmidt, thank you very much for coming.